Welcome back to CIA Declassified, the broadcast dedicated to dissecting the classified documents that reveal how intelligence agencies seek to exploit the most vulnerable system of all, the human consciousness. Today we move beyond physical weapons into the realm of cognitive modulation. We address the chilling fact that U.S. intelligence explored the possibility of using focused external energy fields to bypass the eyes and ears and generate perception, sight, sound, and touch directly within the brain. We are analyzing the CIA's involvement in direct neural uplink and remote sensory input, treating the mind itself as a receiver that can be programmed. Our primary evidence is the declassified file CIA-RDP70-00041R000100020011-3, a document originating from the CIA's Research and Documentation Program archive concerning advanced cognitive research. This report is titled, quote, Synthetic Experience Fields and Cognitive Modulation, end quote. It confirms that specialized neurophysiology, signal processing, and biophysics resources were tasked with evaluating the possibility of creating a controlled pulsed electromagnetic field engineered to induce electrical patterns in the brain that perfectly mimic the normal sensory experience of seeing, hearing, or feeling. The context here is absolute informational control. If an adversarial asset can be convinced they are talking to a trusted colleague or that they are miles away from their actual location without ever putting hands on them or leaving a physical trace, the strategic objective is achieved with total control over their immediate reality. The file's existence confirms that subjective experience was viewed as a strategic vulnerability ripe for exploitation. The analysis focuses on two primary areas: cortex mapping and frequency targeting for visual and auditory input, and remote modality transfer for untraceable delivery. Let's drill down into the rigorous and deeply unsettling theoretical methodology documented in this file. The analysts demanded a path to weaponize subjective perception. The file required an intense focus on neural decoding and encoding. The research centered on creating a precise map of the electrical activity corresponding to specific sensory inputs. For example, what exact sequence of electrical pulses in the visual cortex equals the perception of a red chair or a moving car? Once decoded, the challenge was to encode that pattern back into the brain using an external EM signal. The theory proposed generating a highly directional, focused EM beam tuned to a frequency capable of penetrating the skull. This beam would be modulated or patterned with the electrical signature of the desired experience. The pulsed energy would act as an induced signal, overriding or creating new neural activity in the cerebral cortex. That's the brain's outer layer responsible for consciousness and sensory processing. The document details three primary applications. 1. Synthetic auditory input, the voice of God, generating voices or commands that seem to originate inside the subject's head, creating confusion, psychological distress, or the illusion of divine or conspiratorial influence. 2. False visual projection, inducing simple visual shapes, targets, or threats in the subject's field of vision, particularly useful for targeted disorientation or creating fear in a complex environment. And 3. Remote interrogation environments, creating a completely synthetic environment, a safe room, a prison cell, or an extreme stress scenario, for a subject where the perceived reality is manufactured entirely by the neural uplink device. The key challenge was maintaining coherence and fidelity. The document outlines methods for ensuring the synthetic experience is high fidelity, so convincing that the subject cannot distinguish it from reality despite the brain's natural tendency to filter external interference. The document includes conceptual specifications for establishing induction fidelity benchmarks, the measurable success rate for a subject failing to distinguish the synthetic input from a real sensory input, e.g., a subject confirming they heard a voice when no sound was physically produced. Crucially, the file dedicated an entire section to psychological breakpoint assessment. This research focused on determining how long and how intense a synthetic experience had to be before the subject suffered irreversible psychological trauma or psychotic break a crucial risk factor for intelligence operators. We must now examine the primary finding, the agency's assessment of the concept's potential for strategic control. This is a critical excerpt regarding the confirmation of viability. Quote, feasibility testing confirms that non-invasive pulsed electromagnetic delivery is theoretically capable of inducing controlled problems in simple auditory constructs directly into the central nervous system, validating the pathway of full haptic and cognitive overlay. End quote. And another quote from a section discussing field application, quote, the ability to eliminate a subject's objective reality and replace it with a controlled, engineered experience grants an unprecedented level of untraceable psychological dominance, end quote. This is the true meaning of the file. It states that subjective reality is merely a pattern of electrical signals, and those patterns can be written externally. The focus shifted from how do we control what the enemy does to how do we control what the enemy thinks is real. We now address the chilling operational implications of this file and the deployment of direct neural uplink and strategic maneuvering. The most extensive redactions occur in the section titled Long-Term Cognitive Effects and Mass-Scale Synchronization Protocols. This suggests detailed discussions around the severe permanent memory damage or chronic sensory confusion that prolonged exposure could inflict, and the highly ambitious plan to synchronize the uplink device to target multiple subjects simultaneously. Why redact long-term cognitive effects? Because this section documents the internal acknowledgement that the weapon, while non-physical, carries the risk of inflicting psychological wounds that are far deeper and more lasting than any kinetic injury. The concept discussed is the creation of a reality denial zone. The system allows a nation to neutralize a critical facility by simply bathing the area in sensory chaos, making coordinated action impossible and driving personnel towards psychological collapse. The file details the requirement for complex directional EM array emitters, which would likely be concealed in vans, satellites, or disguised in common electronic equipment near the target zone. The strategic weaponization of this research is clear. It is a cognitive dominance weapon that fundamentally changes the nature of psychological warfare. A state possessing this capability gains the ability to field a weapon that achieves strategic objectives by attacking the mind at its most fundamental level, the perception of reality. We conclude our analysis of this document. The existence and scope of the research confirm that U.S. intelligence treated the direct remote programming of human sensory experiences as an actionable, high-priority strategic objective. The implication is that analysis moved into the sphere of applied consciousness engineering, seeking to exploit the mechanisms of the mind for the sake of perpetual intelligence advantage. This research represents the ultimate weaponization of thought. If this documented truth has opened your mind to the technological boundaries explored by those in power, we require your continued support. First, like this episode and leave us a detailed 5-star review wherever you listen. This is how the analysis exposes the deeper scientific agendas. Second, share this episode with someone obsessed with neuroscience, sensory manipulation, or the future of psychological warfare. We need more sharp minds analyzing these documented facts. Before we move to our next scheduled investigation, a note to our listeners. I will be going back into our archives to edit and extend some of the prior episodes that had shorter running times, providing deeper analysis that they deserve. This process will begin with the next episode, Tracking the Alien Probe in Polar Orbit. After these extensions are complete, our return to brand new investigations will begin with a look at cryogenic stasis and long-term sleeper agents. Tune in next time for the extended analysis of Tracking the Alien Probe in Polar Orbit, and thank you for continuing to dissect the truth with CIA Declassified. Until then, remember, maintain your vigilance, question what you perceive, and keep your critical thinking sharp. I'll see you in the archives.